this on? Yes, it is.
Yep.
Okay. Thanks so much, Avi, for being here. You do such important work in the United Kingdom. And so I hope you can give folks a sense. Of course, you can only speak in detail about your agency, but I hope you can give the folks some idea of what's happening across the United Kingdom government in relation to digital skills and digital inclusion.
Hi, everyone. Yeah, it's really a great honor to be here. I suppose that, my French colleagues weren't able to make it, and I guess me being here, that must mean that our government is in complete, we're okay. Yeah, I think I'll leave it at that. Okay, so across the UK government, there's increasing amounts happening on digital inclusion. I think if you kind of track the trajectory of policy focus on digital inclusion over the past kind of 10, 15 years, you'll see kind of a graph that looks kind of like this in terms of people coming onto the digital skills spectrum, gaining those essential digital skills. But in the past probably 2 to 5 years, that is plateauing. And especially over the past couple of years, we're seeing kind of numbers of people gaining those the full gamut of digital skills in the kind of low hundreds of thousands per annum. And that obviously is of great concern to us. At the moment, we're looking at around 11.3 million people in the UK who lack the full, what we call the full 5 essential digital skills. So, as you can imagine, older and disabled people are kind of the two of the most excluded groups. So, over the past, in the kind of early days of digital inclusion work in the UK, we were seeing a kind of a one-size-fits-all approach. So those low-hanging fruit, the kind of people you'd expect to adopt digital skills, came online, and that was that kind of trajectory. It was those people who were coming online, and now the most excluded people are those who remain offline. And as you can imagine, there's if someone remains offline today, there is probably a very good reason for that. So we're looking to design policy in a way that focuses on those most excluded groups. And I suppose, although that sounds like a simple thing to do, in terms of UK policy, by focusing on those two groups, you are obviously also saying, we are not focusing on other groups. Or, if you choose to focus your work on a particular area, you are then seen to be kind of turning your back on another area. But I think we're kind of taking a pragmatic approach and saying, like, not only will we focus on these most excluded groups, but any kind of learnings that come out of those initiatives will be at least in part shareable and applicable to the other excluded groups as well. So, for example, in the last year, we've launched an innovation fund targeted specifically at the digital inclusion of disabled and older people. There are kind of 2 other kind of additional sub-criteria in focusing on those in rural areas. And again, I think when I use the term rural areas, it means something very different in Britain than it does in the US. I mean, we're talking, the rural areas are kind of 3 hours drive from London. And over here, you can drive for days sometimes to find those rural areas. So again, it's all relative. But so looking at rural areas and also trying to combat loneliness. So loneliness is a big policy. A big policy focus at the moment across UK government, and seeing how digital can alleviate those having significant feelings of loneliness is also a sub-criteria of the fund. So I think one of the kind of exciting projects that was funded was a pilot around designing smart homes for older people, where older people in their own homes are kind of the kind of slightly more tech savvy older people are trained to kind of be able to use tech in their homes in ways that will really benefit their lives. And importantly, they become the trainers and host coffee mornings and social gatherings in their homes to their older peers. And it'll be very interesting to see what the outcomes of that pilot are. Again, it's in a rural setting. And then there are kind of younger digital buddies built into the project for kind of longer term support for people who have just kind of been introduced to this tech. So yeah, that's an interesting one. And again, other projects include kind of an app to target obesity amongst those with Down syndrome, and also digital kind of telehealth solutions and digital training for the carers and families of those in palliative care. So again, some of those kind of really excluded groups, and also seeing how the solutions can link those people up and improve the social connections for them also. Just to go kind of across government a little bit, across the NHS, there's a program called Widening Digital Participation, which is in conjunction with an organization called the Good Things Foundation. If you haven't looked up the Good Things Foundation's work, it's really worth looking up. They're active in the UK, in Australia, and I think also Kenya now. And they are a charity that does a lot of work across government and across society to alleviate loneliness. And their work at the NHS involves kind of pathfinders around social prescribing and how using digital tools can really help citizens achieve better outcomes in life. My team's also working, and again, I'll talk about this in a bit more detail tomorrow, but the Digital Skills Partnership is a big project in the UK, which I guess is our kind of flagship skills initiative. It works across the full skills spectrum, all the way from digital inclusion at the basic digital skills end, all the way to advanced skills. And it's, I guess, the crucial point that kind of defines our approach at the moment across my team is that partnership element. So it's a partnership between corporate partners, so Google, Microsoft, Cisco, and a number of the banks, Barclays, Lloyds Bank, amongst others, and government and third sector. So I guess our message to anyone who wants to work with us is that the only way we're going to solve this issue is in partnership. No one of those agencies, no one of those organizations can solve this problem alone. And I think perhaps government has taken a far too kind of unilateral approach in the past. And again, some corporates have done that as part of their kind of corporate social responsibility programs. But again, we are much stronger when we're working together, and that's kind of that's the philosophy of the Digital Skills Partnership. I could go on, but if there's anything else you want to ask about.
Can you elaborate some? Sorry. Can you elaborate some on any notable non-governmental initiatives that are occurring in the UK on digital inclusion?
Yeah. So there's a couple of things I'd highlight. So the first thing is, again, in the spirit of partnership, this is something which we are very supportive of, although it's very much still kind of a non-government initiative. There's a consortium of organizations called the One Digital Consortium, and that is a partnership between Age UK, which is the biggest non-profit working with older people in the UK, Citizens Online, which is a long-standing digital inclusion operator in the UK, SCVO, which is the Scottish voluntary organisation, one of the biggest housing associations and supported living organisations, Clarion Homes, and who's the last one? Digital Unite, again, another digital inclusion organization. And they're working together to address digital inclusion via a digital champions approach. So they are training champions which are embedded within organizations, and different types of champions. So some are volunteers, some are employees who have a certain amount of hours in their week dedicated to supporting and training colleagues and customers in digital skills. And then there are fully professional champions as well. And one of the things they've done is also kind of compare the efficacy of those different approaches as well. That's all funded through UK lottery funding, national lottery funding. And I think the project comes to an end, I think, next year at some point. But they've managed to kind of get a level of penetration which perhaps other organizations and other initiatives haven't managed. So, and again, digital champions models are kind of were at one point very popular. Then I think because a lot of organizations realized that using volunteers perhaps wasn't the most effective approach. So again, to One Digital's kind of comparison was an interesting one. Lloyds Bank, just for your information, also has a digital champions model where, based within their branch network, they have digital skills support for anyone, not just their customers, but anyone can come in and be supported. And again, also Barclays has digital eagles that support their customer base, and also as citizens as well. The Digital Skills Partnership is based around pledges of skills by corporates. We had around 4 to 5 million sessions of digital skills free at point of use from our corporate partners, and that was the basis, that formed the basis of the Digital Skills Partnership. And I suppose some of this is just kind of serendipity that government, corporates, and the charity sector kind of all were moving in the same direction. We had the right people in the room at the same time to make this happen. But I think it's also a kind of a real change in approach towards this partnership approach in all of those sectors. So again, I think that's a really important thing. And there's also recently, in terms of non-government, JP Morgan and the Good Things Foundation have recently announced some joint work together. So that's going to be an interesting piece of work, both a lot of research and actual delivery work as well. So it'll be interesting to watch how that pans out. I think that's probably the two things I'd highlight.
And so I know that another aspect of your team's work is improving diversity in tech roles, and of course that's very important for the future and for improving the numbers of underrepresented groups. And so, can you tell us a bit about the work that you're doing on digital skills and inclusion with regard to that?
So I think we're kind of working at different levels. So there's the skills element, looking at the pipeline to tech. So my colleagues at the Department for Education will work at this kind of the school level and those kind of formal interventions. DCMS, my department, are the smallest department in Whitehall, and that allows us to kind of maybe work in a bit more of an agile way compared to the Department for Education and some of the other departments. So we're often kind of piloting different ideas, experimenting, and our mantra is always to try and kind of spread that philosophy to people who are working with us, that it's okay to fail, it's okay to try something, it may not work, but when you fail, as long as you share the learnings with other people to make sure they don't do the same thing next time, that is incredibly important, and unfortunately it cannot be taken for granted. Certainly across government, I can't speak for other agencies, but we're trying to kind of promote that approach. So again, our innovation fund, as an example, some of those things may not really work, and if they don't, you'll see a blog post saying that, just as in the same way as you'll see a blog post extolling the virtues of the successful programs. And the reason I mention that is that we're going to be, in the same way as we ran an innovation fund on digital skills, we hope to run one on improving representation of those diverse groups who unfortunately are massively underrepresented amongst tech roles. And another narrative that we're trying to change is this isn't a problem for the tech industry. Now, DCMS, my department, oversees the tech industry in the UK, specifically that sector. But as we all know, roles in every sector are going to be tech roles to some degree, and increasingly so over time. So we're making sure that everyone is taking it on as their problem, and it's not just our problem. And the other narrative change that we want to make is that we've been, in my opinion, been selling tech the wrong way. We've been selling it upside down. We've been selling skills. Now, if you're from a background where your family maybe never had digital skills, they never went to university, they're not part of that world. Selling someone skills in tech, it just won't speak to them. And it won't be attractive to them. Again, many of those people will have never seen a role model, would have never been able to associate with someone they know who fits into the category, which in their mind is probably an old white male behind a computer gathering dust over the course of a career. So if that's not someone you associate with or can relate to, selling someone skills won't necessarily work. We need to flip that over and sell the outcomes. What do you want to do? What do you want to achieve? Do you want to change the world, right? And mostly that kind of message is what gets through to those most underrepresented groups. And I think if we lead with the narrative of what are the outcomes you want to achieve for yourself, what are the benefits you want to have an impact on society, that will have a big impact. And that's kind of that kind of narrative shift is what my team is trying to kind of drip feed across government. So when working with the Department for Education, who we now work with closer than ever, to make their digital skills packages more attractive to those underrepresented groups. And we also have a great program which we fund, and although it's industry-led, we've funded it since its inception, called the Tech Talent Charter, which is a charter that all companies and organizations can sign up to commit to making their hiring practices more gender diverse. But the aim will be, it's been live for a couple of years now, it has over 300 signatories from kind of Microsoft, Cisco, BAE Systems, Vodafone, BT, all the way down to kind of charities, SMEs, startups, who are signing up and committing to making their organizations a more welcoming and comfortable place for a diverse workforce. And the aim will be to expand that in future across different protected characteristics. So maybe not via the Tech Talent Charter, but new initiatives to address kind of ethnic diversity and disability and others within the tech sector. And I guess this is probably something which will be raised by others, but this is the issue of data. We find it very difficult to get really accurate data when it comes to kind of the specific communities that are underrepresented. So when you, for example, in the UK, look at the gender diversity in the tech sector, you're looking at, depending on who you ask, around 17 to 19% representation of women in the tech sector. When you look at ethnic diversity, it looks like it's pretty representative of black and ethnic minority, the population of the UK. But when you cut into that data, you see that certain communities are well overrepresented and some communities are massively underrepresented. But the problem is that the more times you cut the data, the harder it is to utilize it, and we find real challenges with that, and it's particularly acute because if you want to work with the Pakistani community or the Bangladeshi community in London, for example, you have to know, you have to go through that community. If you try and use the same approaches with one community as with another and assume that the same approaches will work, you will fail. So we need to know, we need to be able to cut really deeply into that data, and also be able to kind of create partnerships with the leadership of those communities in order to make sure that that we are designing programs that are attractive to them and actually work for them, and not something that we as government assume will work. And I think gradually we're making headway towards that, but I think we've got quite a long road ahead of us.
And so to take up on that point, across all this work, what do you see as the greatest challenges that you and the government face on digital inclusion policy and practice and out in the communities as well?
So I think the issue of motivation is probably the hardest thing we're dealing with. Again, in the UK, somewhat because of our size, infrastructure and broadband rollout is less of an issue. We've reached kind of 97, 98% coverage, and it's so it's not necessarily that people don't have access to broadband, but they have, and also cost has kind of gone down. That the barriers in terms of price is probably it's not accessible to all, but it's accessible to most. The main issue that we're having is people who may have the ability to go online. They may have the financial capability to do so, but they are steadfastly refusing to do so. So they are able, but they are unwilling. And in recent surveys, upwards of kind of 60 to 70% of people who said that the internet, they proactively decided not to be online. They said nothing you tell me will ever convince me to go online, right? So that's kind of our challenge, to get those lost percentage points of people online, and I think we can do that in a few ways. And I think to solve that challenge, we're looking at how can we embrace public service touchpoints, which these groups engage with, and use them to piggyback digital inclusion initiatives on the back of. So often the most digitally excluded groups are the ones who are the heaviest users of public services, whether that's healthcare services or kind of employment services. So how do we kind of embed our programs in the programs of other departments who have all of the levers and all of the access that we lack? So although we have the policy lead on digital inclusion, we don't have those huge citizen-facing programs that the NHS has, that the Department for Work and Pensions has, and many others. So I would say the first thing we would do is see how we can embed digital inclusion better into those projects. Now, that it does already happen to an extent, but again, my plea to people in whether it's Her Majesty's Revenue and Customs, that department, or Department for Work and Pensions, is you have huge thousands of employees working in phones call centers, answering people's questions on how they fill in their forms online. Now, usually the default response is, "Oh, let me fill that out for you over the phone." Right? But that just means that citizen is going to call back the next month, or in 6 months' time, or in a year's time, when they need to do the next form, and you're not helping that person necessarily with their skills. So how can we change that model and maybe front load some investment in that support to go from what we would call an assisted digital route to a digital inclusion route, and really kind of embed skills in that. So at the very least, how can we use it to signpost people to local digital skills initiatives near them? But even better, how could we embed training within that kind of that support infrastructure? So I think that's something which a challenge which we're going to be facing over the next kind of couple of years. I would say in terms of other challenges, just kind of cross-government join-up is always pretty difficult. Everyone's got their own focuses, their own ways of thinking, their own ways of working. So again, as DCMS, we're able to kind of, in an agile fashion, just try and influence and persuade other departments in a way perhaps that hasn't been done before. So we're trying to increase join up that way. My team have created the first cross-government group on digital inclusion in the UK, so which has representation from every department with any kind of relevance to digital inclusion. And there's a kind of a working level group. There's a directors and director generals group on this, and again at the ministerial and Secretary of State level, we hope to be able to raise that at a digital implementation task force, which is the kind of ministerial group that oversees all digital projects in the UK. There has been a small blip, which is known as Brexit, which you may have heard of, and that means that kind of things have, if not completely ground to a halt, have slowed down. So that is posing its own issues. But again, that cross-government join-up that continues to be an issue. But interestingly, I think Brexit might have some kind of unintended positive consequences, whereby if the environment becomes more difficult after Brexit, organizations may be forced to pay much more attention to upskilling and hiring a much more diverse group of employees, because our talent pool will be depleted. So I'll be interested to see how that pans out. But Brexit's certainly one of the challenges.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Avi, for sharing all this wonderful, informative information with us. That concludes our time for this section of the session. And so thank you so much for coming all the way to the U.S.
Thank you for having me.